the giant statue that he built and talk about how wonderful Nebuchadnezzar was. And this isn't a little statue. It says 60 cubits. Who knows what a cubit is? What is a cubit? Anybody know? There's actually two different things that a cubit could be, and it depends on where you lived, but they're very similar. The first thing that a cubit typically is, if you hold your arm up, you have to hold your arm up or it doesn't work. Hold your arm up and look at your elbow, and then measure the distance from your elbow to your wrist. That's a cubit. And if you happen to be an average size adult man, that's about 18 inches long. Weird thing about that is it's almost 18 inches on most people. So it's kind of a consistent measurement. The other cubit is actually just from your elbow up to the tips of your fingers. That one's not used as often in the ancient world because some people have really long fingers. But most people's arms are about the same length. Weird. So that one from your elbow to the tip of your hand tends to be about 2 feet. And if you hold your arm out like this, from the tip of your finger to the tip of your nose, is about 3 feet. Didn't you know God designed you using the customary system and not the metric system? Weird. Right? So those are measurements that people used to use in the ancient world. And if you take your hands and you spread them out like that, from fingertip to fingertip, is about 6 feet. Because most people are about 5'8" to 5'10", and then you add your shoulders in there, you get about 6 feet. So that's what's going on. He's got this 90-foot tall statue. Have you ever seen a statue 90 feet tall? I haven't either. I've seen tall statues. How tall is the Statue of Liberty? Ooh, very good answer. So if you can imagine, like you fly into New York, like people travel around the world to see this copper statue in the middle of the bay, and it's actually in New Jersey. New Yorkers have been lying to you forever. Right, the Statue of Liberty is actually, it's in New Jersey. So what we've got is we've got this statue that is there in the middle of this water, and people come and they fly it, and they're like, wow, look, a big statue. Same thing, except this one wasn't green, it was golden. And so can you imagine how bright and shiny this statue was? How magnificent it must have been to see this 90-foot tall statue of here he is. Right, this vision that Nebuchadnezzar had. And so he calls all his friends together. And what do you do when you get friends together? Well, you normally have pizza and ice cream and music. I don't know if they had pizza and ice cream, but they had lots of music. So he calls his friends together, and listen what he says. When you hear, in verse 5, the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. What does that sound like when you hear that? What does that sound like? It sounds like a mess. Like, can you imagine what that would sound like if you have all those instruments playing at once? I don't know what it would sound like. A mess. It was just loud. So you've got the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music. And when that plays, everybody is to fall down. And now, Nebuchadnezzar isn't actually a really good friend to have. Because have you ever been over to a friend's house and they say, we're going to play the games that I want, or I'm going to feed you to my dog? Right? Has anybody ever said that? No? Good. So you have better friends than Nebuchadnezzar. Right? Because Nebuchadnezzar invited all his friends over and he said, you're going to fall down and worship my statue, or I'm going to throw you in a really big fire that I made. And this furnace that he's got is actually a furnace that they would use to refine metal. It's big. It's actually dug into the side of a hill, more than likely. And so if you can imagine a big hill, and on the top of the hill is a giant hole where smoke is just coming out of it. And the side of the hill is kind of cut away so that you can see this furnace and you can get the metal out of it. Put metal in, and they go to the bottom of the hill and they get the refined metal out. So there's this huge furnace, this smelting furnace. And it would be really, really hot. Have you ever tried to melt metal? You've been on like a campfire or something, and maybe you're roasting marshmallows on a coat hanger or something, and you like stick the coat hanger in the fire, and you say, I'm going to melt the coat hanger. You normally can't do that. You can make the coat hanger red, but you can't melt it because it's really hard to get a campfire hot enough to melt metal. Well, this furnace got hot enough that they could melt metal. And so it's really hot. And he's threatening his friends. If you don't bow down and worship this statue that I made, then I'm going to throw you in the really hot furnace. So most people, what do you think they did? What? They probably bowed down. Why? Yes, Adelaide. So that we get thrown in the fire. I've never been inside of a furnace when it's lit, but I've been close to furnaces when they're lit, and they're really hot. And one of the weird things about kings in the ancient world is they could do whatever they wanted. Have you ever been somewhere where somebody could do whatever they wanted? Stay away from those places. Right? No, I've never been somewhere where somebody could do whatever they wanted. That's really scary. Have you ever gone from a really good mood to a really bad mood all of a sudden? Have you ever been really happy and then 30 seconds later you're really angry and you don't know why? Have you ever thought about that when that happens? You were really happy 30 seconds ago, and now for some reason you're really, really mad. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, why am I mad? It was probably either a really silly reason or no reason at all. So how would you like to have somebody who could do anything to you they wanted, who 1 minute was really, really happy, and then 30 seconds later they're really, really mad for no good reason? That seems pretty scary to me. I don't think that I would want somebody to be able to choose whether I lived or died based off of how they were feeling at the time. That's kind of scary. There are actually lots of examples throughout history where kings would get really mad at somebody and hurt them, and then 30 seconds after they hurt them say, you know, I probably shouldn't have done that. Thanks. Right? You can't undo that. You can't get somebody out of the furnace normally. So what happens here is King Nebuchadnezzar says, if you don't worship my statue, if you don't play all the games that I want to play, I'm throwing you in the furnace and it will be bad for you. So they play the music, and everybody falls down and worships the statue, except for 3 people. What are their names? Yeah. Close enough. Right? Shadrach is one, Meshach, Abednego. Does anybody know their Hebrew names? Hananiah, Mishael, yep. Azariah, yes. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Those are the 3, right? They're from chapter 1 with Daniel, and here they are in chapter 3. It seems like they've been sent out to different places, and they're governing different regions. And now when Nebuchadnezzar calls all of his friends together, they get called together. I don't know where Daniel is. Daniel probably was too busy to come to the party, because I don't think Daniel would have worshipped the statue. Do you? I don't think so. So nobody knows where Daniel is. He was busy. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't bow down. Now, have you ever been somewhere and everybody is doing something? Is it easy to do something different? Or is it hard? It's hard. What if you went somewhere, like what if you went to a town over and you walked into a store and everybody in the store was wearing their shoes on their hands? You'd probably look at them funny for a minute, but they would all be looking at you funny too, because you're not wearing your shoes on your hands. And everybody in the town is looking at you funny. So guess how long it takes most people to put their shoes on their hands? I'd give you a minute and a half. Most people within a minute and a half will change to conform to the situation around them, or they'll be really uncomfortable. You can watch. You can do this, okay? Next time you go out to eat with somebody, you know how you go to a table and they put a napkin on the table and they've got the silverware rolled up in the napkin all nice and neat? The next time you go to a restaurant, loudly, not like super loud, like don't scream, but unroll your napkin, kind of go and put your silverware on a plate, and then take the napkin and lay it in your lap, and then look at the other people at the table. And if they don't do anything, look at them harder. Guess what will happen in about 90 seconds? They will look at you, and they will look at their napkin, and they will unroll it, and they will put their silverware on the plate, and they will go, and they will put it in their lap. And then you smile at them. Because you just used what is called in psychology the social pressure to conform. Say that out loud 5 times real fast. You don't have to. The social pressure to conform. Anytime you get a group of people together, they tend to act like each other. And if you want somebody to do something, just do whatever it is and then look at them like there's something wrong with them if they're not doing what you did. Right now, you can use this for good, which is why I'm telling you about it. So you should do good things and then give people funny looks when they don't do it, and they will want to be like you. But in this situation, there's like 1 billion people worshiping the statue. Who do you think is going to change? All the people bowing down, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Typically, the 3 people. Typically, everybody doing something will cause those 3 people to do something else. You know, Satan knows that people like to act like other people, and you better believe that he will use this to try and get you to do what he wants. And so when you find yourself in a big group of people and they start doing something that is bad, most of the time my recommendation for you would be to leave. Because that social pressure to conform, that want to be like everybody else, is really, really, really strong. That's why over in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul will say bad company corrupts good morals. What he just said is the social pressure to conform is so strong, most people can't resist it. In other words, if you're with a group of friends and they're doing something bad, you should leave. Tell them you don't want to be there. Tell them that you need to go home. You know, don't lie. Don't say, oh, my mom just called when she didn't. But you can like text your mom and say, call me and tell me to come home. And I guarantee you that she will call you and tell you to come home. Or you can text me and I'll call you and you can say, sorry, my preacher called me and said I had to go home. Now, people might think that's a little weird, but I'll do it. Just find a way to leave, right? So what happens here is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego can't leave. Either way, they're going to be in trouble. If they leave, they're going to get thrown into the furnace. If they don't bow down, they're going to be thrown into the furnace. So they do the only thing they can. They just stand there. And what happens, actually, is this is an opportunity for them to be a good example to all of the other people. And so, unlike Disney fairy tales, nobody else stands up. They worship the statue, and then they go and they tattle. Has anybody ever tattled on you before? Everybody with siblings is going, yes. Is that a good thing? Well, it depends. Here they go and they tattle and they tell the king, hey, guess what? The Jewish people that you appointed, they're not listening to you. Right? And so if you're the king, this is bad. Because if you're the king, the people that you are in charge of, they have to listen to you. You're the king. Right? If you're running a company and you have people who are working for you and you tell them on Tuesday you can't eat salami for lunch, and then everybody comes with salami on Tuesday, now we've got a problem. Right? Teachers in a classroom, if a teacher tells you on Thursday we don't wear shorts to school and everybody wears shorts, now we've got a problem. If mom and dad tell you you can't have a cookie and then you go and get a cookie from the cookie jar anyway, we have a problem. Because Mr. Cuffle said, no. Nebuchadnezzar calls them. Verse 13. Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. Remember how we talked about how the mood of the king can change suddenly? It does. He was really happy. He was throwing a party, and now he's really mad. And these 3 people are brought to him, and Nebuchadnezzar said, and to his credit, he actually asks them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image that I have made, that was good. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Right, so now they have a problem. Are they allowed to worship other gods? No. Are they allowed to pretend to worship other gods? No. But the king just said they have to fall down and worship the god, the idol. What do? Nothing. They're not going to fall down. That's exactly right. So Nebuchadnezzar asked this question: who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? That's a really good question. Who is the God who will save you? Who is the God that will keep me from hurting you? What? The Lord your God. Yes. See, all of Nebuchadnezzar's gods were statues. Right? Every single one of them. In fact, some of them weren't even statues. Some of them were just like mosaics, tiles on a wall. In fact, we still have some of these mosaics from when Nebuchadnezzar was alive. We don't have them. People have them. If your God was a statue, can that God do anything? No. In fact, that's one of the things that Isaiah and the other prophets will say about idols. They'll say, there's no breath in the idol. The idol's not alive. In fact, you made the idol. You went and cut the tree down, and half of the tree you used to make a fire, to cook your food, and the other half you carved into an idol. What is the point of that? Why are you worshiping something that you just made? What strength is there in the statue that you carved? Does that seem like a good idea? No. You created a God, and now you expect that God is going to save you? And so that is the God, those are the gods that Nebuchadnezzar knows. He knows that they're fake. He knows that they can't do anything, which is why when he decides that he's going to kill these three people, he asks, who can save you? In Nebuchadnezzar's mind, what is the answer? Does he think any of his gods could save Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? No. The golden statue isn't going to reach into the furnace and grab them out. The lions on the Ishtar gate, beautiful blue gate with lions on it, they're not going to jump off the wall and go save them. None of the Babylonian gods will do anything. They're just statues. So as far as Nebuchadnezzar is concerned, this is the end. They're going to be in trouble. So here's the answer. In verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they said to the king, we don't have to give you an answer. Wait, what? What if the president called you and said, what are you eating for lunch today? What would you tell the president? A ham sandwich on rye. Right? You would probably give an answer. Why? Because the president of the United States just called and asked what you were eating for lunch. I don't know why he would do that. But if he did, you'd probably tell him. So here, somebody like the president, except even more powerful, asks these people to do something, and their response is, we're not going to tell you. We don't have to give you an answer. If you do this, look at verse 17. If you do this, our God, who we serve, will save us from the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand. And here's my favorite part. But if not, we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. You see, the thing about God is he is God whether you live or die. He is God whether you worship him or not. He is God whether he keeps you out of a bad situation or whether he doesn't. For a long time, I used to think that God was God because he always saved people. He always delivered them. He always did exactly what they wanted. But you know what that is? That's the genie from Aladdin. That's what that is. God is not at my command. I don't get to tell God what to do. I don't get to tell God who to be. He's God. And whether I worship him or not, he's still God. One day I will be dead, unless the Lord returns first. But in 150 years, when I'm dead and very few people remember me, if at all, will God still be God? In 1,000 years, when all of us are gone and there's no more United States, will God still be God? Yes. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when the king says, bow down or else, they say else. And even if God doesn't save us, we won't bow down. Because we don't serve God to get things from him. We serve God because of who he is. And oftentimes people serve God because they want stuff from him. Have you ever heard something bad happens in their life, and all of a sudden they're like, why did God do this? I've been so faithful to him. How come God didn't do whatever it is that they wanted? That's not the right reason to serve God. Have you ever done something like really nice? Maybe you volunteered for something, or maybe you helped somebody out, and then later somebody says, well, why did you do this? Right? Why do you do good things? Have you ever said, because it makes me feel nice? It makes me feel good. That might be true. It should make you feel good. But think about this for just a second. If the reason you do good things for other people is so that you can feel good, isn't that selfish? Yeah. If the only reason you do nice things to other people is so that you feel good, that's a selfish reason. Why should you do good things to other people? Yes. For them, yeah, to make them happy. Because it's the right thing to do. That's why you do the right thing. Not because it makes you feel good. It should, right? Doing good things should make you feel good. That's a nice consequence. But you do the right thing because it's the right thing. Because sometimes doing the right thing will not make you feel good. Have you ever burned your finger? How do you think it would feel to be thrown into a fiery furnace? When they do the right thing, it's going to hurt. Sometimes doing the right thing hurts a lot. And so if the only reason why you do something is because you like how it makes you feel, then there will be times where you don't do the right thing. Right? So these people, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they say, we're going to do what is right because it's the right thing to do. We're going to serve God because he is God. Not because he will save us, not because we like the things he gives us, not for any of those reasons, because he's God, not your statue. So we can't worship your statue. That's not God. How do you think Nebuchadnezzar feels when they say this? Happier or mad? Mad. Yes. Where's Cooper? Cooper, we need the double thumbs down, right? Mad. He is not happy. So he does what any good king would do, and he gets really angry, and he orders them to heat the furnace up 7 times hotter than normal, and he tells them to go throw these people into it. And in fact, the furnace is so hot that the people who go carry them up to the top and are going to throw them in, it's so hot that the heat kills them. And apparently Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego tumble in, they fall into the furnace, and then everybody goes to the bottom, and they're looking to see what happens. And King Nebuchadnezzar, when these people, in verse 24, if you're following along in Daniel chapter 3, King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he got up, and he went to his counselors, to his friends, and he said, didn't we throw 3 people into the fire? Yes, they say 3. But I see 4 people walking around in the middle of the fire, and they aren't hurt. And the 4th one looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the fiery furnace. Apparently it's been a little while, and the heat is starting to cool down. And he yells at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they come out from the fire. And the satraps and the prefects and the governors and the counselors saw that the fire did not have any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and they didn't smell like fire at all. As somebody who has had several unfortunate accidents with fire, I can tell you the first things to go are the hair on your hands and your eyebrows. It just happens that way. If you are in a hot situation, one of the first things to go is your hair, and it smells really, really, really bad. Now, if you're close to a fire, hopefully you're not ever close enough where you burn your hair, but if you're close to a campfire, you're going to smell like smoke. You just do. And you're going to go take a shower, and for 3 days, you're going to smell like smoke. It's just how it works. It's fire magic, I guess. Well, these people come out, not only have they not had their hair singed, they don't smell like smoke, and their clothes aren't hurt at all. It's amazing. And this fire is so hot that it killed other people who just got close to it. But nothing, it didn't touch them at all. And so Nebuchadnezzar is going to be amazed by this. And he is going to say, I'm going to make a new rule. Any person or nation or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn apart, their houses will be ruined, and because no God can save like this God. So Nebuchadnezzar goes from wanting them to bow down to worship his God to saying that nobody can say anything bad about their God. Now, I don't know if I would say that Nebuchadnezzar is a believer yet, because chapter 4 is about to happen. But Nebuchadnezzar is at least open to the idea that there is a God. I've never been in a situation where somebody has thrown me into a giant furnace before. I hope never to be in that situation. But I have been in situations where somebody doing the right thing has changed other people's minds. And really what you see here is God working through the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to affect the people around them. If Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had bowed down, there would be no story. But they had the courage to stand up when everybody else is bowing down. And God used that faith to change Nebuchadnezzar's heart and to affect the people around them. And when we get to chapter 4, we're going to see the final element of that, right? The complete change in Nebuchadnezzar. And if you notice, even though they're not obeying, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're being disobedient. But even though they're not obeying the king, were they ever mean to him? Did they ever call him names? Did they ever make fun of him? No. They're respectful. There might be a time in your life where you have to make a similar choice. Usually, we can find a way around it. Most of the time, I would argue, you can probably find a way around it. But this time, there's no workaround. But when they disagreed, when they were disobedient, they were respectful. So if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, following God does not give you license to be mean to people. It means that you are going to be faithful to God. And when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego disobey, they do it in a respectful way. Chapter 4. So now King Nebuchadnezzar is writing. This is an interesting section in the Old Testament. A Gentile is writing scripture. So Nebuchadnezzar comes and he says to everybody who lives in the world, everybody, I want to tell you about God. And he starts off by telling you what happened. So he was in his house and he's walking along his palace and he saw another dream, a dream that made him afraid. And Daniel is going to be called and he's going to tell Daniel about this dream and these visions that were in his head. He says, behold, this is verse 10. I saw a tree in the middle of the earth. And if you have that blank page that I was telling you about, this is where you kind of draw in what was going on that page. So in verse 10, I saw a tree in the middle of the earth and its height was great. And the tree grew and became strong and its top reached up to heaven. That's just the sky. So it was a big tree. It was up in the sky. It's visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful. Its fruit was abundant. It had food for everyone. The beasts of the field made shade under it. The birds of the heavens lived in the branches, and everything in the world was fed from it. And then I saw in the vision a watcher, a holy one, probably an angel, came down from heaven, and he proclaimed aloud, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, and strip it of all its fruit and scatter it. Let the beasts run away and the birds flee its branches, but leave the stump in the roots of the earth, bound with iron and bronze amid the grass. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. So did you notice how we go from talking about a tree to talking about a person? Did you notice that? Nebuchadnezzar noticed that too, I think, and that might be one of the reasons why it worried him. And even if he didn't notice, still the dream is kind of worrisome. There's this beautiful tree, something comes down out of heaven and chops it down, and everybody that was happy is now scared and they've run away. It's a bad dream. And so Daniel is going to come, and he's going to say, Daniel, please tell me about this dream. And now Daniel was sad. In verse 19, look, it says Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was sad, and his thoughts scared him. Now Daniel is about to give the king bad news. Why do you think it made Daniel sad? Do you like telling people bad news? No. Do you like telling people that someone they like got hurt? Or maybe that their dog is sick? Or maybe that they can't have a cookie? Right? Now, that's not fun. That's one of the hardest things about being a parent, believe it or not, is when your children come and ask you for a cookie, it's really hard to tell them no. Because I want them to have the cookie. I want them to be happy. I want them to have a good time. But I know that too many cookies means a trip to the dentist's office and missing teeth and all kinds of pain and trouble and belly aches. And so usually I say no. So sometimes parents tell you no because they love you. Remember that. Later when you ask for cookies and say, Mr. Cuffle said, and your parents say no, it's because they love you. So Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel is going to tell him, you're the tree. You are the tree. And you are going to be cut down, and you are going to become like an animal, and you are going to live with the animals in the field, and you're going to eat grass like an ox, and you will be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 time periods will pass until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whoever he wants. Do people eat grass? Now before you answer, this is a trick question. Have you ever eaten bread? Then you've eaten grass. Wheat is actually a kind of grass. In fact, if you go to like a shake store, they'll actually put wheat grass in your shake for you. Don't do it. It's disgusting. Right? But you can. I mean, if you really want to, you can. But your beautiful shake will now taste like dirt. You've been warned. All right, so people do eat grass. Now, we don't eat like Bermuda grass or like St. Augustine or things like that, but we do eat grass. We eat plants. And so what is happening here is instead of eating all the things that the king used to be eating, like bacon, now he's going to be eating just plants. And so he's out in the field, he's out with the animals, and he's just eating the things that he can find. And all of this is going to happen to him because he refused to recognize that God was God. And so that's what happens. He comes, and one day he's on top of his palace, and look at what he says. This is in verse 30 in chapter 4. Is this not great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? What's the problem with that? Was Babylon an incredible place? Yeah. You were going to raise your hand? Yeah. Okay. So we've got Babylon. Did you know in ancient Babylon there was a river that ran uphill? What? Yeah, that's the right face to make. Huh? Rivers don't go uphill, do they? They did in Babylon. How did they make a river run uphill? Well, you see, today it would be easy. You just get some hydraulic pumps and you can just like pump the river up the hill. But the problem is those didn't exist in the ancient world. But everybody talks about this river in Babylon that went up to the Hanging Gardens and then watered all the plants. We don't know how they did it. But in Babylon, there was a river that ran uphill. It was an amazing place. And Nebuchadnezzar looks out and says, look what I did. Look at how great I am. And look at how glorious I am. What's the problem with that? Who is glorious? Louder. God. Who controls the rising and falling of nations? God. Who makes kings and tears them down? God. Right, there's a theme to the answers here. Who is in charge of everything? God. Right, God. That's the problem, is Nebuchadnezzar thinks that he is something when really compared to God, he's not so much. So God does what God said he was going to do, and Nebuchadnezzar becomes like an animal. Look at verse 33. Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven away from the people. He ate grass like an ox. His body was wet with the dew of heaven until his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers. I don't know how long that is. Long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like bird's claws. Now, if the 7 time periods are 7 years, his hair would be kind of long, wouldn't it? If he didn't cut his hair for 7 years. Have you ever not cut your hair for 7 years? I don't know that I've ever gone that long without cutting my hair. I think the longest I've ever gone is like 1.5 years. My dad hated it. So he looks like an animal. He's got claws for fingernails. He's got hair like a bear. And finally, his reason comes back to him. He lifted his eyes to the sky, to heaven, and he blessed the Most High and honored him who lives forever. So in order for Nebuchadnezzar to realize that he isn't God, he had to be turned into an animal. He had to be made like an animal. He went out and he acted like an animal. He ate the things the animals eat. The animals were his friends. And this isn't like a cool thing like on like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the Land of Make-Believe. Not that kind of animal. Right? This is where he's like a cow, an ox. In order for him to realize that he isn't God, he had to be turned into an animal. If you go all the way back to the garden, people have the same problem. People think that they can be God. They think that they can make the rules. Adam and Eve choose to take the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they become mortal. Right? They were mortal already, but God was keeping them alive. They're kicked out of the garden, and now they will die. They become like the rest of creation. And God is going to save us from that. And so here you have a man who is a king. He's kicked out of that. He goes out into the wilderness and becomes like an animal. And finally God saves him and brings him back. It's kind of the story of the Bible here in a little picture. So when his reason comes back to him, Nebuchadnezzar says, I praise and extol and honor the King of heaven. All his works are right, his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. Now the cool thing about this is Nebuchadnezzar's son apparently is greatly affected by this. And when we go back and we look at history, there is this king between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar who goes on a pilgrimage to go find the one true God. Wait, why would he do that? Because his father said, I praise and extol and honor the King of heaven. Sometimes it's hard to see the people that you affect, and sometimes you will never know the good things that happen because of your faith. But Daniel and his friends were faithful in the middle of Babylon, and their faith affected even the king, Nebuchadnezzar, who at the end of chapter 4, I would call him a believer. Right, here he is. He believes in God. He believes that God is in charge of everything. And he's such a believer that his son will actually also want to be a believer, and he will go and look for this God. He'll go on a trip to go, like people will go on a trip to Jerusalem or other places. He goes on a trip to look for God. So you can do great things by doing really small things. All Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did was stand up. They didn't build a giant statue. They didn't build a great palace. They didn't run a mile in 3 minutes. They didn't do anything amazing like that. They just stood up when everybody else bowed down. The amazing thing about faith is it turns little things into really big things when you do them for God. So don't ever worry about how big you are or how small what you're doing seems to be. If you're living faithfully for God, then everything that you do matters. Every day, every moment matters because you are showing the world that you believe in God, that you listen to God, and that you love Him. People will see that. People will notice. And you may not ever see how it affects them or changes them, but it is your faith that through which the world will see Jesus. Thank you very much for being with me this morning and for answering questions. And next week, we'll continue and we'll look at a couple more chapters in Daniel.